The sterile scent of engine oil and fresh paint filled the air, so thick you could almost taste it. Inside the Mercedes truck showroom, bright overhead lights gleamed off acres of polished chrome, making the cavernous space feel like a cathedral dedicated to commerce. Near the front, a trio of executives, their power suits sharp and their heels clicking on the pristine tiles, shared a light, confident laugh. Their world was one of order, ambition, and high-gloss perfection. Then the automatic glass doors slid open, and a ragged old man stepped hesitantly inside, bringing the dust and weariness of the outside world with him. His beard was a long, untamed cascade of white. His cap was torn at the edge, and his shirt was stained with the faint, ghostly marks of many long days and even longer nights on the road. He looked utterly out of place, a forgotten verse in a song of luxury. But what none of them could possibly know was that this single, quiet moment, this one awkward encounter, was about to change everything they thought they knew. He moved with a slow, deliberate shuffle, the soles of his worn-out boots scraping softly against the showroom floor. His only possession seemed to be a heavy, faded backpack slung over one shoulder. A few mechanics in clean overalls paused their work, turning their heads to stare. The three women, whose laughter had just been so effortless, exchanged confused glances. One of them, the manager, Miranda Hale, a woman whose silver hair and confident posture radiated authority, raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. The old man's eyes scanned the room, passing over the smaller models until they landed on the largest white truck, a true titan of the road. He approached it, placed a calloused, grease-stained hand on the cool chrome grille, and whispered something too quiet for anyone to hear, as if he were greeting a dear old friend. "She's a beauty," he finally said, his voice soft. Then he straightened up, looked toward the women, and announced in a gravelly tone that carried across the hushed room, "I'll take 5 of these." The words seemed to hang in the air, a completely absurd joke that nobody understood. One of the younger women, Julia, who was new to the job, had to physically stifle a burst of laughter. The other two didn't bother to hide their amusement. Miranda smirked, a condescending smile playing on her lips. "Sir," she began, her voice dripping with false patience, "these aren't bicycles. A single one of these costs more than most people make in a lifetime." The old man simply nodded, his expression completely calm, unbothered by their mockery. "I know," he said plainly, "and I'll take 5. The laughter in the showroom grew louder, echoing off the high ceilings. Yet something about the old man's unwavering calm unsettled Miranda. There was no trace of arrogance in his eyes, no sign of delusion. There was only a strange, quiet certainty that felt more solid than the polished concrete beneath their feet. "Sir," she said, trying to maintain a professional tone, "perhaps you're in the wrong place. There's a used vehicle lot just down the street." He offered a faint, tired smile. "I'm in the right place," he replied, adjusting the heavy strap of his backpack. "But maybe you're seeing the wrong man." The women turned away from him then, whispering amongst themselves as he walked over to the small coffee machine in the corner. He ignored the coffee and poured himself a small paper cup of water. No one paid him any mind. No one noticed that his hands, though rough and weathered, moved with the unshakable steadiness of someone who had spent a lifetime handling heavy, powerful machines. No one knew that those very same hands had once steered military convoys through desert war zones, had built entire engines from nothing but scraps, or had carried the small, light coffin of his only son down a muddy road many years ago. His name was Harold Brinley. He had once been a brilliant engineer, a decorated soldier, a loving husband. But life, in its cruel and unpredictable way, had taken everything from him. His wife, Clara, had passed away in a hospital he couldn't afford to keep her in. His company, a small trucking business he had painstakingly built from the ground up, had been ruthlessly swallowed by corporate sharks who saw him as a bug to be crushed. In the span of a single devastating year, He had gone from a respected business owner to a man sleeping in his old, cold workshop, using his backpack as a pillow. But Harold was not the kind of man to quit. He was a believer in the road, that long, endless ribbon of asphalt that could lead a person anywhere, so long as they just kept moving forward. For 5 long years, he had been saving every single cent. He repaired broken-down trucks on lonely roadsides, slept in abandoned garages, and ate cheap meals from vending machines. All the while, he was quietly building a new dream, a dream no one else believed in. He imagined a transport company run by people like him, people who had lost everything. He would hire veterans, single mothers, the homeless, anyone who just needed a second chance to stand on their own 2 feet again. He called it Second Route Logistics. And today, this very day, was the day it would finally be born. Miranda sighed, shaking her head at the strange old man, and went back to her paperwork. But when she looked up again a few minutes later, Harold was standing right beside the reception desk, holding out a small, neat stack of documents. "Here's my purchase order," he said, handing it to her with that same steady hand. She blinked, taking the papers from him. It looked real. It was properly stamped. Company details were filled in, and all the required signatures were in place. Julia, the new girl, leaned in closer, reading the company name aloud. Second Route Logistics, Incorporated. Miranda frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Who authorized this?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Our finance division will need to—" She trailed off, her words catching in her throat. She froze. The signature at the bottom of the page was one she recognized instantly. Her eyes widened in shock. It belonged to the regional head of Mercedes Commercial Partnerships himself, a man who only ever approved orders from their most exceptional and high-value clients. Miranda looked up at Harold, completely stunned. The smirk was gone, replaced by pure disbelief. How did you get this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. He gave her that same tired, gentle smile. "He was my student once," he said softly, "back when I still taught mechanical logistics. I used to fix his trucks for him, long before he had a big company to run." A profound silence fell over the showroom. The laughter from earlier now felt heavy and shameful, a bitter taste in the air. Julia lowered her eyes, her cheeks flushing red. The third woman, Serena, stepped forward and said quietly, "Mr. Brinley, I'm so sorry for—" But he raised a hand, stopping her gently. "No need," he said. "You are only doing what the world teaches us to do. To see with our eyes, not with our hearts." The next hour was a whirlwind of frantic activity. Papers were verified, urgent calls were made, and within moments, everything checked out. Harold Brinley wasn't some delusional wanderer. His payment for all 5 trucks had already been wired in full. He wasn't buying them to boast or to show off. He was buying them to build a future. Later that afternoon, as the showroom slowly emptied and the harsh lights softened with the setting sun, Harold walked toward the delivery bay. Miranda followed him quietly. "You know," she said after a long, contemplative silence, "I judged you the very moment you walked through that door. I saw your clothes, your hands, and your old bag, and I thought you were just another old man with a dream that was far too big for reality." He looked at her, his eyes kind. "Dreams don't get smaller just because people stop believing in them," he said. "They just wait for the right hands to come along and build them again." He paused, glancing back at the gleaming white trucks lined up like powerful sentinels ready for duty. "These machines will feed families. They'll carry hope from one town to the next. That's worth more than anyone's pride, don't you think?" For the first time in years, Miranda's professional, hardened exterior softened. "It is," she said, her voice filled with a newfound respect. "It really is." When the 5 trucks finally rolled out the next morning, the entire town seemed to be watching. They were driven by a team of men and women who, just a few days earlier, had been sleeping in shelters and on the streets. Word had spread like wildfire about the ragged man who walked into a Mercedes showroom and bought a fleet of trucks, not to build a fortune, but to rebuild lives. A week later, the showroom received a handwritten note in the mail. It was from Harold. It read, "Thank you for the laughter. It reminded me how far I've come. Maybe kindness doesn't start with believing in others, but in simply giving them a chance to prove you wrong." Miranda folded the note and placed it in her pocket. Sometimes the most extraordinary souls walk in wearing torn clothes, and they leave behind lessons that shine far brighter and last much longer than even the most polished chrome.